You didn't choose your beliefs, they chose you. Right now, there are ideas living inside your mind that you think are yours, your opinions, your values, your worldview. But what if I told you they were installed? Not by you, but by fear, by confusion, by the desperate human need to make sense of chaos. Carl Jung warned us over a century ago. People do not have ideas, ideas have people. And he meant it literally. An ideology doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't knock on the door of your rational mind and wait to be invited in. It slips through the cracks of your anxiety, your loneliness, your unanswered questions. Fear, confusion, isolation. These are the three ingredients, and once they combine inside a population or inside a single person, the mind becomes fertile ground for possession. Not by demons, by ideas, and the terrifying part. It feels like salvation. Today, we're going to dissect exactly how this happens, the psychological machinery behind ideological capture, why it feels so good to surrender your thinking, and how you can protect yourself from becoming a puppet of beliefs you never consciously chose. This is going to disturb you, and it should. The anxiety trap. Before any ideology can take hold, the ground has to be prepared, and the fertilizer is always the same anxiety, not the everyday kind, not worrying about a deadline or a parking ticket. We're talking about existential anxiety, the kind that makes you question whether the world makes sense at all. Psychologist Erich Fromm studied this extensively in his landmark work Escape from Freedom. He observed something paradoxical about human beings. Modern man, freed from the bonds of pre-individualistic society, has not gained freedom in the positive sense of the realization of his individual self. In other words, freedom terrifies us. When the structures around you crumble, economic collapse, political instability, social fragmentation, your brain enters survival mode. And in survival mode, the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for critical thinking and nuance, literally shuts down. Your amygdala takes over. Everything becomes threat or safety, enemy or ally, black or white. A frightened mind cannot think in shades of gray. This is not weakness, this is neurobiology. Your brain is designed to trade complexity for certainty when it perceives existential danger, and this is exactly where ideology finds its opening. But the anxiety alone isn't enough. Something else has to happen first. Isolation primes. The second ingredient is isolation. Not just physical isolation, though that accelerates it. Psychological isolation. The feeling that nobody understands you, that the world has moved on without you, that you're fundamentally disconnected from meaning. Hannah Arendt, who studied the rise of totalitarianism more deeply than perhaps anyone in history, identified this as the precondition for mass movements. The ideal subject of totalitarian rule is not the convinced Nazi or the convinced communist, but people for whom the distinction between fact and fiction no longer exists. And how do people reach that state? Through isolation. When you lose your social bonds, you lose your reality testing mechanisms. Think about it. When you have close friends, a community, people who challenge your thinking and hold you accountable, extreme ideas get filtered. Someone says, wait, that doesn't sound right. Alone, vulnerable, captured. But remove those connections, and suddenly there's no filter. The internet promised to connect us. Instead, it sorted us into echo chambers where our anxieties get amplified and our isolation gets disguised as belonging. If this pattern is starting to feel uncomfortably familiar, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring the depths of your psyche with me. Because what comes next explains exactly how the trap closes shut. The false savior. Now imagine you're in this state, anxious, isolated, confused, your brain is screaming for relief, and then someone appears, a leader, a movement, a belief system, and it offers you three things simultaneously. First, an explanation for the chaos. Everything that's gone wrong, it's not random. There's a reason, there's a pattern, there's a cause. Second, an enemy to blame. Your suffering isn't meaningless. Someone did this to you. A group, an institution. An ideology opposite to this new one. Enemy. Third, and most seductive of all, a promise of salvation. Follow this path, believe this narrative, join this group, and everything will be okay. The chaos will end. You will be saved. Eric Hoffer described this in The True Believer. Mass movements don't attract people who are satisfied. They attract people who are desperate for meaning. A mass movement attracts and holds a following not because it can satisfy the desire for self-advancement, but because it can satisfy the passion for self-renunciation. The person doesn't join the ideology to become more of themselves. They join it to escape themselves entirely. And this is where something terrifying begins to happen inside the brain. Certainty addiction. Here's what nobody talks about. Ideology feels good, not just comforting, neurologically rewarding. After weeks, months, or years of anxiety and confusion, suddenly having absolute certainty triggers a massive dopamine release. Research from University College London showed that the brain processes uncertain threats as more stressful than certain negative outcomes. Let that sink in. Your brain would literally rather know something terrible for certain than live with ambiguity. An ideology delivers certainty on a silver platter. Every question has an answer, every problem has a villain, every doubt has a response. Psychologist Robert J. Lifton, who studied ideological totalism extensively, identified what he called thought-terminating clichés, simple phrases that shut down critical thinking. Thought-terminating clichés. You've heard them in every political movement, every religious extreme, every online faction. Short phrases that make complex problems feel solved, and every time the believer encounters a contradiction, they reach for the cliché. It stops the doubt, it restores the certainty, it triggers another hit of relief. This is not metaphor. This is addiction to ideological certainty. And like all addictions, the tolerance increases. The positions must become more extreme to deliver the same satisfaction, but there's a deeper mechanism at work. Shadow projection. This is where Carl Jung's work becomes essential. Jung understood that every human being carries what he called the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. Our capacity for cruelty, our selfishness, our cowardice, our hatred. In a psychologically developed individual, the shadow is recognized and integrated. You know you're capable of terrible things, and that knowledge keeps you humble and self-aware. But in an ideologically possessed individual, something catastrophic happens. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Instead of facing their own darkness, the ideologue projects it entirely onto the enemy. Every quality they cannot accept in themselves gets assigned to the opposing group. They're the evil ones, they're the corrupt ones, they're the threat. And here's the psychological magic trick. This projection feels like moral clarity. The more you demonize the enemy, the more righteous you feel. You don't see yourself as someone running from your own shadow. You see yourself as a warrior of truth fighting against darkness. The Nazis didn't think they were villains. They thought they were saving civilization. Projection, righteousness, blindness. Every genocidal movement in history was carried out by people who believed they were the good guys. And that should terrify you, because the mechanism is not unique to them. It's operating inside every human mind, including yours, and there's another dimension to this that makes it even harder to escape. Tribal identity. The ideology doesn't just give you answers. It gives you something even more powerful, an identity. And this is the hook that makes escape nearly impossible. Social identity theory, developed by Henry Tajfel, demonstrated that humans will sacrifice personal interest to benefit their in-group, even when the group distinctions are completely arbitrary. We are wired to belong. We are wired to be part of something larger than ourselves. The ideology becomes not what you believe, but who you are. And once a belief system fuses with identity, any challenge to the belief feels like an attack on the self. This is why you cannot argue someone out of an ideology. You're not debating their logic, you're threatening their existence. Neuroscience confirms this. Drew Weston's research at Emory University showed that when politically committed individuals encounter information that contradicts their beliefs, the emotional centers of the brain light up, not the rational ones. The brain literally treats contradictory evidence as a threat and deploys defensive mechanisms. The person isn't thinking through the counter-argument. Their brain is fighting it off like an immune response fighting a virus. You cannot reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. And yet, there's an even deeper layer to this possession. Meaning vacuum. Nietzsche predicted all of this. Over 100 years ago, he declared that God is dead, not as a celebration, but as a warning. He understood that the collapse of traditional structures of meaning would leave a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But flip that around, he who has no why will desperately grab any meaning available, no matter how distorted. Viktor Frankl observed this in the concentration camps. Those who survived often had something to live for, a purpose, a person, a mission. Those who collapsed into despair had lost all sense of meaning. Ideology fills the meaning vacuum with manufactured purpose. You're not just existing, you're fighting for something. You're part of a cosmic battle between good and evil. Your life has narrative structure, a beginning, a struggle, and a promised resolution. Purpose, narrative, mission. For someone drowning in meaninglessness, this feels like being thrown a lifeline. They don't examine the rope, they don't ask who's on the other end, they just grab it, and they hold on with everything they have. Because letting go means returning to the void. But the most insidious part of ideological possession is what it does to your perception of truth itself. Truth collapse. Once ideology takes hold, truth stops being about correspondence with reality. Truth becomes loyalty, Something is true not because evidence supports it, but because the group affirms it. George Orwell described this with surgical precision in 1984. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. This isn't science fiction. This is happening right now on every side of every political divide. Studies on motivated reasoning show that people with stronger ideological commitments don't process information objectively, they process it defensively. They accept evidence that supports their position and reject evidence that contradicts it, regardless of its quality. Delusion. But here's what makes this truly terrifying. The person doesn't experience this as bias. They experience it as clarity. They genuinely believe they're the ones seeing truth while everyone else is brainwashed. The most dangerous ideologue is the one who believes they have no ideology. Because the moment you believe you're immune to ideological capture, you've made yourself maximally vulnerable to it. Blind spot, everyone has one. Your blind spot is the entry point, and it's the one place you cannot see. So how do we wake up from something we don't know we're asleep in? The antidote. If ideology enters through fear, confusion, and isolation, then the antidote must address each of these. First, face your anxiety instead of escaping it. Existential anxiety is not a disease. It's a signal that you're confronting the genuine uncertainty of being alive. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations not to eliminate uncertainty, but to develop the psychological strength to live within it. 1. Tolerate uncertainty instead of fleeing it. 2. Maintain genuine human connections. 3. Practice intellectual humility daily. 4. Interrogate your own beliefs ruthlessly. 2. Protect your connections. Real connections, not digital echo chambers. People who disagree with you respectfully are worth more than 1,000 followers who validate your every thought. 3rd, and this is the hardest one, develop a relationship with your own shadow. Jung's entire therapeutic project was about this. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. When you can see your own capacity for hatred, for cruelty, for self-deception, you become much harder to manipulate. Because you no longer need to project those qualities onto an enemy to feel clean. But there's one final piece of this puzzle that ties everything together. Reclaim your mind. The philosopher Terence McKenna once said something that cuts to the heart of everything we've discussed. The cost of sanity in this society is a certain level of alienation. And he was right. Choosing to think for yourself means accepting that you will sometimes stand alone. It means tolerating the discomfort of not having all the answers. It means resisting the seductive pull of certainty when that certainty requires you to stop thinking. This is not easy. Your biology is working against you. Your social environment is working against you. Every algorithm, every news cycle, every outrage merchant is trying to capture your attention and recruit you into a narrative. Think for yourself. But here's what Jung understood that most people miss. The work of psychological development, what he called individuation, is not optional. It is the fundamental task of human life. When individuals refuse to do this work, when they refuse to confront their shadow, when they refuse to develop their own values through genuine reflection, they don't just harm themselves. They become available for possession by collective madness. Every atrocity in human history was carried out by individuals who had abandoned individual thought for collective ideology. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Not who your tribe tells you to be, not who your ideology demands, not who your fear shapes you into, but who you actually are when you have the courage to look. So here's the uncomfortable truth we've been building toward. Ideas are not passive things you carry around, they are living forces that can carry you. When a population is afraid, confused, and isolated, they become psychologically primed for savior. The ideology provides an explanation for the chaos, an enemy to blame, and a promise of salvation. And the most horrifying part, it feels like relief. After months of anxiety, finally having certainty provides enormous psychological comfort. But that comfort comes at the cost of your autonomy, your critical thinking, and ultimately your humanity. Jung's warning was not about politics. It was about the soul. When individual psychological development is neglected, people project their inner demons onto the external world. They stop having ideas and start being had by them. Possessed by ideas. The question is not whether you have ideological blind spots. You do. Everyone does. The question is whether you have the courage to examine them, to sit with the discomfort of not knowing, to resist the siren song of absolute certainty. If you made it this far, comment "Depossessed" if you're ready to start reclaiming your own mind. Welcome to the Psyche Project. If this made you think differently about your own beliefs, subscribe. Understanding yourself is the work of a lifetime. See you in the next video.